What's going on, guys? So today I want to make a video talking about this trapdoor OTF. This is a very cool, interesting vintage design. You can see that trapdoor just popped open. This is made between the 1950s and 1960s by a company called Bonza. But this is basically a combination of a gravity knife and basically the first OTF, the first out the front opening automatic. So how this knife works is there's a trap door. That's why it's called the trap door. It's just a little piece of metal here that pivots. Okay, so it stays shut when the knife is upright, and when you angle it down, it opens up. Okay, its purpose is basically just to keep dust and dirt and grime and stuff out of the inside of the knife where the mechanism is, right? So how to use this is there's a plunger or button on the side. You're going to angle this down. Okay, it can be kind of sideways all the way to upside down, and you push the button, and the knife shoots out and locks in place. Okay, there is a lock on the side here. Okay, it just switches up to be locked. It only locks in the open position, and that prevents basically this plunger from being pushed and the blade pushing in. Okay, so when you want to actually use this knife, you would cut with it, but if you bump that button, as long as the lock's on, the blade will still stay out. Take the lock off, push the button, the blade slides back in. But as you can see, it works like a gravity knife, okay? So when you push that plunger in, the blade just freely slides back and forth, depending on what angle you have, right? But when it's all the way down, you can see that the blade is still poking out. And that is because there's a spring mechanism on the inside on the bottom of this. So what happens is you use the trap door itself to close this blade, but as I'm pushing it, I'm building up pressure. And at some point, the blade clicks in place on the inside, and when you push the plunger, that little bit of spring tension is what initiates the blade out. That's why it shoots out instead of falls out slowly, okay? So that's what makes it, I guess, technically, it's an automatic, it's an OTF, it's the first version of an OTF that I know of, but it still works on gravity. Now, if you're really fast and you hit this button and let go, because when you hit the button, it'll shoot out. The blade will shoot out, but if you let go at the right point, you can have it lock open upright, okay, as opposed to upside down. All right, so if you leave the trap door open, and I'm going to try to time this quickly. And did I get it? Yes, I did. It opened and locked up. So we're going to try it again here, because you do have a satisfying click if you do it right. There you go. So you can see I pushed the plunger in, the spring tension shot the blade all the way up, but I had to let go at the right second so that it would lock in totally open. If you don't time it right, all right, it'll go halfway and just kind of get stuck, or maybe go a little bit out. So it's really not meant to be used upright in that position. It's really meant to be turned upside down and push the button, because when you push the button in upside down, it doesn't matter when you let go of it. Okay, just let go of it when you're done opening it. Whereas upright, you really have to time that appropriately. But anyway, there it is. Very cool. Let's look at the markings real quick on here. All right, you see on the blade, we have the circle logo. It says Bonza, rust-free or rust-free, Sologen, which is where it's made, Sologen, Germany. Now, some quick history on the Bonza brand. Bonza of Sologen, Germany, was created in 1876, and they closed down in 1982. Again, this knife is from the 50s and 60s era. And Bonza was originally a combination of two people. One person was Bottgen, I think. It's B-O-N-T-G-E-N, and Sabin, or Sabin, S-A-B-I-N. So those two people came together and created Bonza Knives. They made all kinds of cutlery besides these trapdoor automatics. They also made some butterfly knives. You could find those occasionally, extremely rare, but they're still out there. They also made some other folding knives, some slip joints, as well as razor blades, which was super popular in the last 100 years or so for all these different knife companies to make razor blades. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Just a little bit of history about the company. Now, this is a really interesting stamp, which I've known about for years. I forget the exact, I'm not going to be able to pronounce it right, but it's something like Deutsches Reichenbachs Munster something or other. But basically what that is a German patent / trademark, okay? And this is basically just to show that this was registered, these knives are registered in all of Germany, okay? So this is on multiple knives, has nothing specifically to do with this brand Bonza. If you have vintage German knives, a lot of them will have this maker's mark. It just means that it was genuinely made in Germany. It was registered in Germany, trademarked in Germany as a German knife. That's all that means. And then the other side, it just says rust free on the bottom, which again is rust free. All right, and on top here, you can see this little notch that's kind of cut out, and that has to do with keeping the blade in. Okay, so when that blade is all the way down, that notch is what's caught to keep it inside the handle. Okay, now something just to note, if you have one of these or obtain one of these, it's good to store them in this position here. So it takes the tension off the mechanism on the inside. Because these are already old knives, you don't want that spring to just be, you know, tensioned up the entire time. It will weaken. It takes a very, very long time for springs to actually wear out, but why take the chance, right? You never know if there's fragile parts in here or brittle metal, and that spring can break at any time. A lot of times when you get vintage stilettos and automatics and stuff, more times than not, those springs are broken on the inside, and these are all pinned together, so they're not easily fixed. So instead of having it stored, you know, completely shut with all that tension on there, it's just better to store it like this, okay? You can have that blade all the way down, just have the trapdoor just kind of leaning on it. Also, these trapdoors break off very easily, as you can imagine, with these old knives. Sometimes you'll find these and they don't have the trapdoor. It's not the end of the world. It's still a very cool knife, but that is the most fragile part on the knife. So again, even when storing this, just be careful of that, not to get caught on something. It would be easy to break that off or bend it. But yeah, all metal construction here, chrome plated stainless steel from what I understand. Some people have said it's some kind of like Zamic type material underneath, some pot metal. You know, it depends on where you get your information from, but it is chrome plated for sure. This particular one has a little tiny chip on the back there, so you can see the metal underneath, once the camera focuses, is not, of course, as shiny. So these are, of course, chrome plated. There is a simple design on the handle here. Later models, I believe Bonza was purchased by someone else, and they did some of these same exact knives, but they were colored. So if you ever find one of these that has like a red coloration, a red paint that's on it, or like a cream color, those are just later models. But all the originals were all just stainless and chrome plated, just super simple. There are different variants, slightly different sizes, slightly different shapes. Some are like more rounded. The patterns, the actual texturing that's on there could be slightly different. But yeah, I mean, these are just really, really cool knives with a very cool mechanism. Now, as far as some specs on here, close is 5 1/4 inches. All right, opened up, it is 9 inches overall, and our blade here is a little over 3 3/4 inches long. This one happens to have been probably carried, but never actually used. This is not that sharp. The edge is somewhat dulled. I think that this was maybe an old find. I don't believe this was used. I believe the very light scratches and the little bit of wear on here is from opening and closing it, but I don't think anyone actually ever used this because it has an original edge on it, but it's not sharp, if that makes sense. It's almost like this was produced, and when they go through the sharpening process, maybe there was a bunch of these, a box of them that never actually got, you know, sharpened. And this one's one of those. That's my assumption anyway, because if it was used, if it was dulled out from use, there would be way more marks and scratches and stuff. It has a pretty polished blade. All right, as you can see, it's very shiny, but I don't see much wear from usage on this. All right, so my assumption was that this was never actually sharpened from factory for whatever reason. Maybe it was forgotten. Maybe they had a bunch that wasn't totally sharpened. Maybe the customer is supposed to sharpen it. I don't really know, but that's just my assumption on it. But yeah, it is a very cool piece of history. It is kind of chunky, 6.1 ounces. I don't know if I mentioned that before, but just a hair over 6 ounces. I mean, it's an all metal construction knife. If you were to actually, you know, sharpen this up, carry it, use it, I think it'd be fantastic. It's just a very cool version of a gravity knife, but you know, realistically, this is the world's first OTF, as far as I know. Now, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that. If there's a previous design, knife design, that work like an OTF, let me know. But as far as everything I've ever read, this was the first OTF, which is, again, it's a transition from a traditional gravity knife, but incorporating just a little bit of spring tension so that it could shoot out as opposed to just, you know, fall out. You can see the difference in speed there. For a regular gravity knife, you know, it falls out with gravity. It's not in any rush. It's getting out there, but it's taking its time, okay, as opposed to being shot out, you know, forcefully being thrown out there and locking. But super, super cool piece of knife history. These are quite rare. They're not impossible to find. Generally speaking, when you find these, you will see them anywhere from $300 to $700. Now, $700 is definitely on the high end of that. If you have one that was mint condition, never used, maybe to a collector you can get 7 bills for it, but generally speaking, these sell for around $300 to $400. Maybe if you get really lucky, you can get it for cheaper if someone doesn't know what they have. But that's about the going rate as of the making of this video in 2021. All right, so if you happen to see this video years from now, that of course can change. I have to say, one of the joys I really get out of making these videos is exposing people to different cool knives. I know there's going to be a little chunk of people who watch this video who have never seen one of these before, and now they think it's really cool and they want to go find one and add it to their collection. I think that's awesome. I really do, because I've done that for years. When I first got on the internet way back in the day in the 90s and started reading the forums, because there was no YouTube back then, but I read the knife forums and people would say, hey, I got this knife, and I'm like, wow, I've never even seen that before. I remember the first time I got exposed to Balisongs or butterfly knives, the first time I saw an OTF, the first time, you know, I saw, a side opening automatic, the first time I saw this brand or that brand. That's all super exciting for me. And I've always appreciated that and really enjoyed that. And now, making videos, I love sharing it. It really is one of my favorite things about being on YouTube, is sharing all of these really interesting things so other people can get interested as well and want them for their collections or want them to use. I think it's just pretty neat. Information is amazing. I love spreading information. I love gathering information. It's just cool. It's just cool knowing about stuff. So if you're into knives and you never knew what a trapdoor OTF was, now you do. There's a vintage trapdoor OTF. I think it'd be really neat if some of these knife companies these days would go back and make these. Like, what's stopping, Spyderco or Benchmade or CRKT or some company like that from recreating this design? It's not that difficult. Now, as far as laws go, that does make things difficult. That's probably their biggest red flag, is technically it's an OTF, so it's an automatic, or technically it's a gravity knife in some states, whatever people presume it to be. Those are really the only limitations, which is unfortunate, because one day when we get rid of all these stupid knife laws, maybe you get some companies that make stuff like this. It'd be cool to have a modern day version of this. They sell for like 50 bucks or 100 bucks or something. It's just neat. You know what I'm saying? And you can play on this design and use modern technology and modern materials and just make this even better. But anyway, sometimes things just die out. And this is one of those things. You do not see these made today. So they are hard to find, but I wish you luck if you're on the hunt for one now. They are obtainable. You just have to do some digging. So that's all. Hopefully you guys have a fantastic day. And thanks for watching. And I'll see you guys tomorrow with a brand new video. Take care.